All right. Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. Just in full warning, I'm in Columbus, Ohio. We're in the midst of a massive thunderstorm, so if something should happen, that's why. So in the meantime, though, let's go ahead and start our program. I'm going to go ahead and share our slide set. And I am Suzanne Caro, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at HighRoad Solution. And today we're going to do our webinar on our Toolkit of the Month. So just to refresh everybody's memory, we're going to look at that, and we're just going to go through a couple of talking points as well today. So today's webinar, and really, it really does dovetail into the previous, at the top of the month, this month, was on interactive content. And I put the title in there so you can go back and look at that if you haven't. But the reason that we chose it specifically as looking at your website content is one of the things, it is going into the end. What we're seeing is there's a big crop now. Almost everything in the association industry happens in waves. And it seems like we're probably coming up on the next kind of usually 3-year cycle of redoing our website. So one of the things that's so important that we look at nowadays when we're redoing our website is that the technology has both come down in price, and the massive amount of tools that are out there really kind of changes the nature of the game as to what you can put in your website. And it dovetails very nicely with the kind of encroachment, the infiltration, if you will, of marketing automation. And so we've had quite a few clients lately where they're beginning to look at putting in marketing automation at the same time that they're putting in a new website, and they want to be able to understand how these two things can go together. So it's a great time to, before you go too far down the road of doing your website, if you could make those two go together and put them and simultaneously plan, that's really going to put your best foot forward, especially if you're looking at running these systems for a good 3-year time frame. So it comes at, we think it's particularly important to really look at web content or the content audit and how that's going to look, because in particular, many of the content management systems today have aspects to them that are marketing automation, meaning you can create a landing page in there, you can create forms, many of them have email capabilities, maybe some social media integration pieces, and then marketing automation has those as well. Then everybody can use Google Analytics, but then there's analytics packages, and there's a lot of confusion as to, should I use my content management? Is that marketing automation? Should I use a marketing automation system? Where do all of these things fit together? And I think the answer is, where there used to be really tight lines between these different types of software, that's no longer the case. And we're looking at a time where where there's a lot of overlap between these systems, and understanding that and understanding how you're going to make decisions between which system and where things go becomes a bit of a specialty of understanding how these things fit together. And ultimately, it's coming from a data standpoint, how you want to treat your client, or treat your, your end user. So that's why we think it's very important when you do this auditing your website piece of it to understand that. All right, so we're going to talk about that in just a second. So first things first, we're going to go through what was the Toolkit of the Month. If you haven't downloaded that, you will look at it and walk through it. It's very simple, and we did that on purpose so we can continue to build on it, to look at how we can really parlay that into helping us to get into understanding our website now as more of an interactive, personalized tool that we can do a better job of being able to excuse me, both serve our current members as well as attract new members, customers, etc. So we're going to look at that, then come back to our web content audit tool and look at it in a little bit more sophistication. All right, so let's go to the tool. Let me pull that up. Okay, so this is the tool. If you see the cover, that if you guys are people that remember things, this is the front page of that. And the actual tool itself, like I said, is very, very simple. And you might say, well, that's, yep, we have something like this, etc. Maybe there's some other ways we can think about doing this. But let's just talk about it really quickly, and then we'll build on. Okay, so this tool, all it's doing is saying, before we go and redo our website, let's kind of take a moment, take a step back, take a pause, and say, how much of the content out there that we have in our website really needs to come over and be put, especially onto a new content management system, right? Or some sort of content platform. Because what associations often, obviously we're all budget conscious, but in particular, there is kind of a hoarding mentality, kind of like I'm afraid to let go of any content, and often, or for that matter, people. And so what happens is that associations have a tendency to have very inflated numbers for their overhaul of their website, because they're thinking, I have to bring over like my 15,000 pages of content that I've always had, right? And that's one of those things, as you get more and more budget, as you get more and more savvy in budget allocation within digital marketing, and you realize that there's other ways to handle like archiving and being able to access content, what are you going to do with it, et cetera. And especially if you come from the standpoint of, we're trying to use a website to capture new people that let's say we don't know, like we want to use it for lead generation, or we want to use it as a different tool than just an archival library of content. We realize that oftentimes we can let go of content. Now, it always depends on, of course, your current situation and what you're trying to do. I guess where I'm going with that is one of the inflection points now in the association world is the realization of, we need to be able to do lead generation. And lead generation usually uses content as kind of my my bait to get people to come, and then I can nurture them in and be able to interact with them. But the important thing is, we have to say, when that's the case, it does have perhaps some time sensitivity to it. So I probably can do a great job of being able to create leads with, let's say, a piece of relevant, updated content. But is it the case that it's the same if it's a piece of content, let's say, 10 years out of date? I can't answer that, because it's, of course, the nature of the content. There could be things that are 100 years and it's still a really hot piece of content that can attract. But it's something to remember, that as our purpose changes, and if the purpose of the website becomes to do lead generation, and it's not always just about having, again, this library, there's some ways we want to think about it. What I've been seeing is that people will take this massive, it doesn't just say you didn't, 10 years ago, people spent massive amounts of money in putting all of their documents into digital, right? And putting all, let's say, their abstracts especially, and they still have great value. Well, there might be a way, as you go to a new content management system in today's world, that you could archive all of that and put it truly in a more library fashion, and not, again, bring it into a new content management system in the same way, and break up your costs and figure out different ways to do that that's beneficial to you from a cost standpoint. Then what you can do is be able to understand where you have gaps with the new content needs, and that's typically when you get into the world of thinking about lead generation and how are we going to do further nurturing. The content audit typically shows you very quickly what you're missing. So just looking, we're going to think about this as doing a static content audit. And what I'd say also is, we're working with web companies, and they say that the first thing I would do is do a little bit of an internal gut check yourself and figure out how much of this truly needs to be overhauled, because it can be expensive, even if programmatically done. And always, if you're coming from the standpoint of user centricity, that is what's going to be important to your end prospective member, etc., oftentimes that you get a different answer than you say what's important to the organization, right? So as we move into being more about the user-centric viewpoint, things can change. So the tool itself is very straightforward. Like, it has content, and this is column B here, is just showing you, I'm going to write down, this could be a web page, it could be a section of your website, etc., or it could be specific pieces of content like a case study or white paper. But this could be pages and pages and pages long. I know in my career doing this with associations, this could be 10,000 documents, and we have a program that reads it all into here. But at some point, typically a human has to come through and say, okay, what really has value? So what this column C here is doing is trying to match up, again, yes, here's your content index, But how do I come out here and say, do I know which of these pieces has high amount of value in terms of, this is kind of your popularity piece, which pieces have high usage, right? And that's what this is saying. How many people have actually used this section, page, or PDF, or download, etc., right? And let's rank them now according to usage. And I think there's always kind of two types of values that you could put in here. You could put usage by a particular population, like the members, and then you could also have, there's oftentimes like an institutional usage, like institutional value to it. And I think that for the association market, that makes a lot of sense. You could have another column here that we could put in as institutional value. If you will, it's like a public good. That you might say, well, I know it's not a very popular piece, but it's something that we need to have legally, et cetera, so it needs to be there, right? And that would be important to put into your static audit, so you have that. Now, here's an interesting question. How are you going to know which of your pages of content have high views? And a lot of clients struggle with this one. It could be that you have every page tagged correctly and you have a system already that shows you that, in which case you're in great luck. It could be that you have set it up in Google Analytics that you can drill down to each page, and then you could be able to ascertain that very quickly. But for many organizations, that's not the case. One of the things that we do is we usually add on a tool from Bright Info that basically runs a full content index for you, and then we let that run for a couple of months, and then it will show you with no ifs, ands, and buts about it, about what is the content that's really used. And I find that really helpful because it puts it into a format that is, I can take it and go with it, right? I can take it and be at the ready. And then I can be able to quickly understand, what's of high value from a usage perspective, and also I can break it down by time frame. So just know that there's some tools out there, agencies like ours can help you with that, et cetera. But if you have a piece of it, that's really good to know about getting that insight. And this, of course, is a real insight about usage and gives you some insight into the user. Now, it would be better than even that if I could then drill down into the ones that are high value and figure out who those people are. And let's hold on to that thought, because when we come back to interactive and personal, that's one of those areas that we want to study. So we could say hi, and we could put a little asterisk there to say we need to remember, that we need to come down here and come back and be able to study those. And if we can drill into them, well, then we're going to start getting more and more insights, right? And understand, what does that mean? Does this mean if there's a high amount of traffic on that page, that this has something to do with purchase or potential for membership, or et cetera? How else could we harness the people that are viewing that to be able to nurture them into a better relationship, okay? Now, as we continue over, column E is pretty easy to understand location. You're looking at your corporate website, your main association, something.org site, or it could be other pieces. So examples, in the association world, many of us have many microsites. We've got affiliate sites. The publication might have a different site, et cetera. So it would be great is to have all these things listed. And then I think this is a very particular important column is looking at audience, right? Being able to understand our audience if we can get to know that. So you could say, here's where it gets into a little bit more into the data-driven. This is still static, but we're going to go down a path. So in my audience, this is me, my first audience column F here, is telling me, here's who organizationally, right, I intended that content for. That's what the organization is saying. This piece of content, let's say my employee policies, the intended audience was internal staff. My solution section was for customers and prospects, okay? And so as you go down the path of data-driven, the goal would be to understand, is that actually who used it? This was my intent. Who's truly the consumer of that content? Okay, and that we're going to need data, and we're going to need technology to help us answer that. But from a static standpoint, we're going to be able to document that. Then the third status, or third piece of it here, is to now just say, okay, the status that we now are looking at, in this date and time, this is how we're going to tag it. Get rid of it, needs review, this is up to date and keep, right? And so again, if we can narrow that down ahead of time before we go down the path of doing, let's say, a website overhaul, or before or when we start getting into more lead gen programs, that becomes super helpful. Now, if you work with an agency like ours and we come in and we say, hey, look, great, you want to do lead gen, great. You want to go to marketing automation. What is your content you have that's really hot, right? Like, what can we use from a content marketing standpoint to be able to attract? What's great is if a client already knows that, right? But if not, this is a good prep kind of work to do that as well, because you're going to want to look like we went right down the row here, the row. We would say, oh, great, look, we've got 4 pieces of content right now today that we can put into an automation program, that we can put into using digital advertising around it to lead people back to the site to get that content right away. It's ready and ready for us to be able to utilize. That's hugely helpful if you are wanting to do lead gen and you need to grow. All right, obviously the next piece is who kind of is the owner of it or department, et cetera, and your last kind of updates, right? Any notes. So very straightforward, right? So, it could be seen as just you could take the superficial level and just look at it and fill it out, or you can see where I'm going with thinking about it a little bit more in depth to say, how can we go further with this? How can we take this and not just say, okay, I need content, we have, 3,000 pages and navigation, et cetera, and already get to like what goes on the home page, okay? Before we get there, let's step back, let's think about the purpose, et cetera, and how we can go a little bit deeper. All right, so going back to thinking about that, about how do we go deeper. So we talked about interactive, and the last time, or at the top of this month, we did a session on using interactive content to convert prospects to customers. And again, I'm using the same tie-in photo here. Why do we need to go interactive on our websites? Why do we need to go down personalization paths? And that is because we have certainly a generation, if not multiple generations now, who've been using these tools and technologies for so long, and our expectation and our experience has actually radically changed. We have a user that has a attention span of less than 4 seconds, that of a goldfish, actually less than a goldfish. We've been inundated with email. Website's been around for a long time. Hopefully, knock on wood, we're past the being able to log in. We get the concepts of having a login username and password and having profiles, and we understand social media, just, hopefully to some extent. Most of us are using, have something, a LinkedIn page, for ourselves. So we've gone so far in the last, let's say, 15 years, that now we have to say, great, is all of that expectation of today's consumer, and of course, it depends on your target user, your market, where you're located, et cetera. But all of that expectation, is it showing itself? Are we showing that we get that in our website? And typically, in websites are seen as, what's interesting is that when you go, associations often think of websites come first, and your email goes out and people come to the website, and then you have your website, and they start from a very website email driven thought process. And in digital marketing, you usually start with the people you don't know, and you're starting from search and digital advertising and all these things that you can do, live events, whatever it might be, direct mail, everything driving to a website. So the website's always the destination, but we really need to spend time getting people there, right? So we're going to do whatever we can to get people to the website. And once I've got them, that was the hard part, to get them there. I got to kind of put on a show. I got to make it entertaining. There's an expectation now that my usage on digital is going to be something that is relatively fun and entertaining, and it's not going to be difficult, and it's going to be easy to use. And that's why interactive now on our websites, when we think about personalization and interactivity, is so important, right? Because once we've got them, we need to keep them going once they get to the website. If you're like, I've never thought of it that way, well, go back to Google Analytics and look at your exit rates, right? Or exit time, how long people stay on the page, how many people get to the, let's say, homepage and then leave, right? So if you have kind of high bounce rates, well, one of the reasons could be that you didn't find a way to engage them instantly in something that they can actually have part in, right? That they can take place in. And that's why this is becoming such a big deal right now. So how do we go down the path then? How do we go deeper, excuse me, on understanding how do we go down the path of being able to really understand that next level of the web content audit, okay? And there's two ways. We're gonna look at how can we think about being further personalized, and the second piece, how can we think about being further interactive. So let's talk about being personalized first. So if I wanna think from a personalization standpoint, I don't wanna hear anybody say, "Dear Suzanne, dear Joseph," right? "Dear Juan." I don't want to hear, that's not personalization. That's like you were able to plug in a name into the greeting, okay? That's, I mean, it's a tiny bit. But personalized, designing a personalized user-centric experience means that I'm thinking about the individual, understanding them in a comprehensive way, and I am giving them options, or I am projecting for them, thinking proactively, thinking about how I can best serve them, right? What would they like? What are the things that they need? What data do I have that would make me think that this would be something of nature to them? And I can do it in two ways from a personalization. I can do it from an organization doing personalization based on data that we have today, like I'm based on your profile, right? People like you, we think would like these seminars, these webinars, these topics, etc. A lot of organizations get scared about that because they either don't have the data or they're afraid of what I'm going to do if I make a mismatch, right? So there's two ways to do it. You could do part of that. If you're uncomfortable, you could, of course, do the other part, which is asking the user. Who's better to know than giving them actual options from which they can choose, and they can design their own experience, okay? So if I really want to make an awesome website, I have to make educated guesses about what I should put on there and how I should organize it, and it should be around the user and what's going to benefit them, not who gets what space on the homepage department-wise, not based on, hey, how much revenue do we make, and who's got non-dues revenue versus, who's got the bigger chunk that's driving the revenue for the organization. It should be based on the users, right? And it could be groups of users, but it should be based on users. And if I'm going to now think personalized about this, and I'm going to ask them, well, then what I'm going to start instantly doing is thinking about how can I be of service to them, right? How can I be of service? So what do I know about them? What could they tell me? And how can I facilitate that? How can I facilitate them having the best experience that they have when I am on my website? And if you want to know who does this probably the best in your organization today, it's probably the event people, because the event people have been designing for user experiences from the very get-go, right? They go into an event and they're going to design the conference, they're going to design the seminar, and they're thinking about all these aspects, right? Who's coming, dietary needs, locations from people, times of days, where they're coming from, what their cultural pieces are, how does this affect them, what's the lighting, what's the temperature, how are they going to move people around. They're thinking all the way around the individual, every aspect about them, from both what they're going to experience, what their aesthetics looks like, what their comfort level is going to look like, what their food they're going to eat, right? The content that they're going to get. They're thinking about the entire thing. And that thinking, that event experience, live event experience thinking, is exactly what is now happening in this web world of we should think about it in the same way. We should think about a digital marketing experience from the exact same way. From the time that they first see us in an advertisement, or we come up in search, all the way till they get to our website, they sign up, they get the email, they get nurtured, they sign up for a program. on and on and on. And we're just adding in now the virtual and the live to get to a total experience for our user. So if we think from this personalized mindset, then some of the things we can do from a web content audit perspective is we can sit there and say, okay, good. What can we do to make for a personalized experience? Well, we can look at how do we match content up together. We can say, okay, wouldn't it make sense if we have content on our website and we can match it with topics of interest, or if the content's tagged by topics of interest, and we can serve that up to people that we know in their data profile also have that topic of interest, or we're worried about that, we can let them choose and say, tell us your topics of interest, and then we'll serve you up that content. And that content can be served up and should be served up in the website, email, et cetera, et cetera. We can do content matching certainly based on where they are geographically. So I'm only going to show, let's say, events that are 2 days ahead of time to people that on their data profile say that they live in a certain area, so that's possible, right? Or I'm only going to show regional seminars to people that live in that region. These things make sense, but our website should be doing this for us, is where I'm going with that, right? So we want to design it in. Content matching also works really good for specialization. So we know that within our entire, let's say, base of gastroenterologists, that we have certain people who are specialized in duodenal cancer, or they work in Helicobacter pylori studies. Well, let's make sure that that content gets served up to them. Within the page, within little sidebars, we're talking like interactive widgets. Something needs to happen where we're getting that content in front of them, and we're not, here's the key, we're not leaving the user to have to search for it on their own. That's a key thing of being personalized and being a facilitator, that we don't just design a website and drop them at the door and let them figure out how to be a maze runner and go through that labyrinth of content. Okay, that's a big difference in today's world of web content design. It's not allowing them to be on their own with just navigation and a keyword search. That's a very minimalistic way to do really good personalization. Okay, what would even be what you see nowadays in kind of other sites that are really all about the user experience is they would have interactive chat features pop up. And if you don't see that the person, if you see them kind of jumping around, it will alert someone, like maybe somebody in member services, and that person will say, hi, can I help you? You know, what are you looking for today, right? So it's like having a librarian on staff who's going to be able to lead you to the shelf and get you exactly the right content. That makes for a much better personalized experience, right? But think about what you would need to have that. You need to understand the user and very quickly have their profile as well as understand your content and be able to do this matchmaking kind of piece of it. Also, another way of thinking about personalization is thinking about peer matching. So I, as the organizational entity, what can I do to create a personalized user experience for, let's say, my member? What can I do? Well, I know everybody else in my database. I know who all the other members are. I probably know the other members based on a variety of criteria. I know specializations they have. I might know where they went to university. I might know their hobbies and interests. I might know their years of experience. So couldn't it be that I start to facilitate a personalized experience by being able to put the right people together, right? So maybe I'm going to launch an online community. But wouldn't it make sense, instead of, again, dropping them at the door and saying good luck, or saying, hey, I haven't seen you logged in, or you should, you know, fill out this, wouldn't it make sense to just go ahead and buddy them up together, right? We have first-year member buddy programs. Why am I not doing that peer matching program on my website with content, right? People like you looked at this type of content last month, right? For your kind of thing, these are the top 5 articles that people read last month. Now that makes a lot of sense to me, right? I'm coming in, I'm a gastroenterologist, I'm looking for information on H. pylori, and I'm in a research institution. Boom. Okay, people that fit your criteria, this is what they found and looked at. I'm always going to value that piece of it, right? And so the technology is there nowadays when we can do it. It's up to us as the organization to start opening up and unleashing that data, matching it with content, and starting to do the extra step of thinking as this facilitator. how can I, again, best serve my members, etc. Okay. Couple other ways to do personalization. Why not think of it also from a lifestyle perspective? If I'm trying to create a personalized experience, wouldn't it make sense that I'm serving up content that's going to fit in with that person that I'm trying to serve? So therefore, I need to know as much about that person on an individual, comprehensive level as I possibly can. So the websites are an important, critical part of this, but email is probably even more critical because it is kind of invasive, right? Websites are just sitting there all the time. They're waiting for somebody to come to. You have to come to me, the website, right? And then I can interact with you. But email is pushing out and getting in front of you, and it's disruptive in some way. So wouldn't it make better sense if I understood your lifestyle so that I can approach you in the right way? Wouldn't that make for a better personalized user experience? So for example, if I understand my users and I'm designing for user experience, from a lifestyle standpoint, it would really help me if I understood, for example, their velocity. Now here's something you probably haven't thought about. Again, trying to work and design a website for a bunch of gastroenterologists, it might be very different than some other segment of the research kind of community or something like that, right? Or that there's a different part of it, the media part of your association. So understanding their velocity, their ability of how fast and what their level of patience is, patience, not patience with a T, but with a CE, their patience. Because again, if you've got high velocity users who are have very little time and they are going to high frustration level, low amount of time to sit there and search and figure it out, and they're not tinkerers, things like having a chat feature where somebody comes in and says, what are you looking for? That might be something that's worth gold, right? And they say, I love this. It's exactly the thing that I wanted. That's the abstract I wanted, et cetera, et cetera. If they have a high velocity also and you don't have like the right advanced search features or filters and criteria, that also can be quite frustrating. So being able to create that personalized experience means we need to understand who our users are on a little bit more intimate basis and be able to match up so that it allows them to not get frustrated and abandon ship, right? We don't want to see those bounce rates. We want them to have an experience, a great personalized experience. I get more out of it than I expected, okay? Other things that'll help us with personalization, if we understand their levels of ambition, we understand where they are in their cycle of life. Like, are they fresh into their career? Are they really a seasoned professional, etc.? That content should be changing, right? The path that I can lay out for them on my website through suggestions for saying people like this, also like this. Here's other pieces, having the right modals that pop up at the right time. That can help me, especially if I can tie it to understanding where they are. There's nothing more frustrating. We do this type of audit work all the time. There's nothing more frustrating than getting like the one email newsletter or the one web page that's for everyone. And it's like, like you're 30 years into your career and they're telling you about this like newbie type of topic. And it's like really, and you're like, what do you say? Where's my money going for my association? You don't know me at all. Right? I'm bundled in with everybody else. I've been a loyal member for 30 years, et cetera, and you're not treating me as if I am in this kind of, lifetime membership and I've achieved this amount in my career. So being able to do that, not in an artificial, like badge way, but like in a real way of being able to create content paths is very important. Last piece of this is being able to add in the right cultural elements. And of course, we have to be sensitive with this one. It's always about, what's going to make sense. But it can create a very personalized feeling for that user. So from a cultural standpoint, that could be things that have to do with heritage. It could be a country level thing like Happy Canada Day, just remembering that these things are happening for certain parts of your membership, et cetera, et cetera. Certain things that have to do with social, the pieces that might tie people together socially, like everybody is like, I don't know, you had karaoke at your last annual conference, that was a huge hit, and you actually got that data down and knew who signed up, and you kept that in there, and you can keep using that from a content personalization scheme. Hobbies, foods that they've signed up for before. For example, when this makes sense, we have some clients who are vegans, right? And if we're going to use imagery right, we're going to make sure that we're not going to use anything that would be offensive to them. Okay, would that make sense? And especially, you know, if you have, you just think about stuff like that. There's no reason the technology can't handle that and be able to serve up the right images to match up with the right people, etc. By the way, since I say that on the generational one, something to think about. You know, for so long, especially the American associations, in particular the American associations, they would have these kind of stock photos and kind of try to get this representative, you know, stock photos of what the membership would be, etc. But, you know, if it makes sense, why not serve up images that's going to be actually resonate with those target audiences, right? And especially if you study anything about niche marketing at like social different levels and things like that, depending on who you're trying to target. There's a lot about how important imagery is to resonate with the right user, right? So that it matches up. So what you're reflecting is your promise of a membership or like a content or a event experience is going to match up with who they actually are, right? So it's being able to match up and show something to the user that is personal to them, that hits a chord, that they say, you get me. That's the purpose of personalization, okay? So a couple different things to think about our content. All right, so next piece is thinking about how can we be more interactive, okay? And I mentioned before we did a webinar that's now on demand about this kind of topic. And if you're thinking about how to be interactive, it basically breaks down into these kind of two overarching kind of buckets. And I bucketed them as interactive tools that help for self-discovery. So this is interactive tools. I mean, literally, the end user is on your website and they're typing something in or they're clicking something. They're actually taking action, not just like surfing and hitting submit. They're actually giving input and they're getting real-time feedback from you. Okay, that's what interactive kind of means from that perspective. So one bucket is self-discovery. You have tools on there that allow them to do self-assessments, right? Do self-benchmarking. And I did a lot of examples in this previous webinar. So assessments might be like, okay, am I ready to go get my CPA, right? Assessment is, you know, where am I in my career compared to other people, right? That might be a little bit more benchmarking. But assessments of understanding how I rate compared to some other set of baseline kind of metrics, etc. Understanding other tools where I can see like, hey, you know, how much do you know as an interactive marketer? You know, how much do you know this topic? So I can see either my level of expertise or I can be able to see that I've got gaps there. Now, why are those tools good? Especially if you're trying to sell anything. If you're trying to sell products or continuing education or conferences, etc. Those self-discovery tools, when used correctly, lead the user to understand, I have a want now. I have some sort of pain that I am seeing. And wouldn't you know it, you, the association, are right there to provide the remedy, right? You've got the answer. Okay, looks like you've got a gap in knowledge about family law. Okay, well, wouldn't you know it, we've got this conference coming up in 2 months and you can attend virtually. Things like that. Or, look, you scored perfect. You're highly competent in this area. You're probably ready for the next kind of certification, right, to take you to that next level because you know you've got an achiever on our hands, right? We've got somebody who is really ambitious. So being able to use those interactive tools does two things. It allows the user to engage. It allows you to learn more about the user, and it allows them usually to set up for something else that you know that you can have more of a relationship with and that you can better serve them with some of the information and products and services that you offer. The second bucket is what I call the service bucket, or like it's showing the end user that we, the organizational institution here, we've got your back, right? And this is this interactive kind of elements to do, basically, you can think of it as like the Amazon.com kind of model in many ways of saying, hi, you didn't actually ask us this question, but we're going to go ahead and try to provide this additional service to you that is hopefully delights you and you didn't expect it, and we go over and above, right? And this would be things like, hey, you need to know about these 5, whatever, legal matters that are coming up. you need to know about these people who are doing something in your field that you might want us to introduce you to, right? You might like this type of stuff. People like you like this. People who bought this also bought that. That whole kind of genre of service, as well as saying like, hey, here's what's on your profile right now, right? You have a company, your company is a member of a trade association. The trade association's being able to show you on the website when you're there, hey, people from your organization, here's all your other people from your organization. Here's what they're doing. Here's what you're doing, right? Like you're better than them, you're, you know, they've done more of their webinar credits, whatever it might be. But being able to serve up that information back to them, there's no reason that your site shouldn't be able to do that, providing that more interactive experience. And you're always trying to get to PK interest and get them to ask more questions. But again, allowing them to put in more information and you kind of serving up information to them, right? And that's kind of thinking interactively and from a personalized basis. All right, so with the time we have remaining, let's put it all together. So if you remember, we started with our content audit that was static. And here's what we had, just refresher. Content, excuse me, which content's most used, where it's located, the audience. And I was saying if you could get, again, drill down further, that would be great, etc. What if we now want to take that same idea and we want to build it out further? So let's first think about what we can now add to that spreadsheet to say, what if I'm thinking about it from a personalized standpoint? So let's look at this one. So in this case, I'm saying I'm looking at it from a membership perspective. So we said, great, what can we do from a membership perspective to make the content experience more personalized? And then what we're asking, because we're doing an audit, is say, do we have this right now, or is this something we need to, create or build, design for, etc.? Okay, so we could say our data description is the year the member joined. So we know we have that piece of data, right? Here it is in our AMS. We're going to say we know we have it. Now we're tying together the end user experience with data. We have that information. Now, if the content management system had that information, if our marketing automation system had that information, what could we do with it? Well, if we know that the year the member joined, we could use that certainly in member renewal notice and member value recognition campaigns, etc., right? But what about from a content segment standpoint? Couldn't we also serve up content that's specific to the year that they joined? Like I'd have content that's separate for a first-year member, right, to lead them down one kind of content engagement path versus, let's say, members who've been there for 3 to 5 years versus a student versus a lifetime member. Wouldn't it make sense that our website dynamically changed knowing who they were? Now I can offer up certain suggestions. Here's other first-year members we might want you to meet, right? Here's like a good package of whatever webinars that would be good for first-year members, right? And we can be able to understand them more comprehensively and provide the right content that's going to fit where they are kind of in their life cycle in terms of your membership, etc. So we could also say, great, how could we represent that content? Well, I just mentioned a bunch of stuff like articles, etc. But we also might want to have a profile badge. So once they're logged in, it says like first year member or lifetime or whatever. And that again has an ability to constantly reinforce their identity, that you know them, and also hopefully create kind of the pain pleasure principle so that we can be able to further engage them and move them along in a life cycle, right? We want to move them through the process, through our membership, and have them continue to evolve with us and stay with us. Okay, what about if we have member type, and we know we have this in almost everyone has this in their association management system. So we want to use the data to be able to segment member benefits such as content and event pricing. We're all super familiar with that, right? Member, non-member pricing. Okay, well, our content segments might be, we have corporate members and we have individual members, right? Remember, maybe I'm a trade association, so I've got corporate members and I've got individual members. How can I make my personalization happen for them on my website? Well, the type of content we might use there would be content streams. So there's an entirely different content stream, meaning content flow, that's a corporate kind of entity. We'll see, an individual who's tied to a corporate membership versus, again, an individual member, right? So we were saying like the corporate member, they might log in and be able to see if they're the right maybe person, if they're like the point of contact, billing contact or whatnot. They can see what everybody else is doing, let's say within their company, from a standpoint that makes sense. They will get a whole, like maybe sidebar, one whole section of the site just on a running basis is showing content that's specific to their, you know, other people that are like them, either at the entity level or at the individual level. Okay, what about things like my join date? So I know I've got my join date in my AMS. How can I use that for better personalization on my web content when I'm on my website? Well, I know I'm going to use it in member renewal notes and member campaigns because we all think email first. But again, why not use it from a content segment about the anniversary? I could get onto the site, it could know who I am, drop a cookie, or I could log in. And why not serve up something about, I could have a big pop-up modal, right? I could have an email come, I could have all of the above. And it's showing me, hey, thank you, right? It's your anniversary. It's been, you know, congratulations. You made it through the gauntlet. You're a year 2 member. See what I'm saying? Those kind of little things can make a big difference, right? So you're always being able to remember that. Maybe something special goes on their member profile, etc. Last one, what about renew date? We all know we use it in member renewal notices. We already have the field. Why not let it drive some of our web personalization experience? Well, again, same thing. We could put banner ads in emails. We could put banner ads in the website. We could do pop-up notices within the website. We can do all sorts of stuff within their content experience to let them know, hi, we've got 90 days to go, 30 days, you're in your grace period. You're still going to be able to log in and get this content, but if we don't do something right, the next time just letting you know, you're not going to be able to log into the members only section, okay? And again, the website should be dynamic enough where it's reading right off of your data and it's being able to deliver up that personalized experience. What about from the interactive standpoint? So the content audit kind of piece to add on there from an interactive standpoint, again, is taking those same type of ideas and looking at it from a, how can I solve a common problem? Because that's where I'm going to build value. If I can solve a problem for someone, right, it's kind of the, they're going to remember that. Yeah, I've helped them to solve a problem. So from a content audit interactive perspective, I just took 3 scenarios. So let's take our first year member. The first year member, the problem, and this is, by the way, this can be a dual problem. The problem you have, problem they have, either can be either one, okay? So this one is the problem that maybe either way. Maybe they don't know how to get engaged in their membership and they don't really know where to start, as well as maybe you, the association, you have a problem that you don't know how to get them engaged in, let's say, your online community. Okay, well, what could you build them as an interactive content tool to help get over that hump, right? Well, why not do a find a peer matchmaking tool? Okay, they become a member, they say, yep, I want to opt in to finding a peer, I want to be a peer, etc. And then I'm being able to match, say, okay, well, here's like a list of criteria. I'm looking for other people like me within this kind of ecosystem. You know, hey, association, can you help find me new people? Okay, what a great interactive tool. 1, I can see, am I a freak, or are there more people like me? 2, where are they located? But the association is now facilitating matchmaking, so I can find people. Okay, I can usually do that through a survey email combination, but that tool is going to allow, that's a huge member benefit, especially for a first year member, right? Otherwise, I look back and I say, well, I was just bombarded with, you know, thanks for joining, and like, here's a bunch of other things that you can buy, but at a discount. See? So this is allowing me to have a real matchmaking kind of tool, or it's allowing the association to become a facilitator and providing that value back. And people have a reason to come to the website, right? They have a reason. They can do communication there, etc. But they're getting something out of it, and they are an active participant. What about for a lifetime member? Same really thing as the first year member from the other end of the spectrum. Why not, you want to solve the problem if you need more mentors or you need more people to volunteer or participate. Well, you might want to put in a content tool that's going to allow them to say, hey, are you a good mentor? Like, do you want to be a mentor? Ever thought about being a mentor? Would you be a good mentor? A lot of people who are the lifetime members or the seasoned part of their career, they either feel like, I don't think anybody wants me, or what I know isn't helpful. I hear that all the time. and it's not the truth. And you have to tell them, you're forgetting how much you actually know, right? So one of the things you can do is by putting in kind of a mentor self-assessment tool, you can also re-engage them and basically reiterate the value that they have to a community, especially if they've been in the industry a long time. There's huge amounts of knowledge that you really don't want walking out the door just because they decide to retire, right? There's a whole other kind of role that they could play. So why not do that? Maybe you pop that up when they come onto the site, etc., so that you can get them to be interactive. And last piece I had is just an example is, what about an expiring member? Well, here you want to remind them maybe of the value of being a member. So an interactive content tool that would be able to help you with that is why not a calculator? Why not show a calculator, right, on the website within email, etc., where it's showing you automatically, hey, if you let this lapse, right, all the benefits you had, they're now going to cost you this, right? Or all these things you had, you're no longer going to have, this kind of these credits, etc. But the idea of putting a calculator in there that they can figure that out for themselves, right? Or that they can be able to play around and say, well, if I go to this membership versus this membership, this event package versus this one, something like that, to allow them to see the value, right? And then you saying, here, do the, here's what you're missing, and here you do the estimation yourself. All those types of tools are very common nowadays, and putting them in has huge effects on the, again, the interactivity piece and the personalization piece. Plus, it allows you to really be able to learn a lot more about them, and it says a lot for the people that use it versus don't. But it will typically help your bounce rate also on your website and just make it fresher and more dynamic and more entertaining. So, in summary, so the toolkit we walked through, we built onto it, and the things that we wanted to get across today on thinking about doing web content audits is really looking at now your website from these three different perspectives. Static, what you already have in terms of content. 2, personalized, what can I provide that's going to really fit that unique user, right? And either, again, they could tell me, I could kind of jumpstart that process. We can continue to fine tune it, but see what I'm saying? That's the end user, and me, the organization, we're working together now. We're already in partnership, right? You need stuff, I have stuff. Why don't we work better together to get there? And the third part is interactive. How can I provide for a more play-like learning experience, right? And again, who in your organization really understands it well? Maybe the people in charge of learning and education. They have a real, obviously they have a huge jump on that one. And also those event people. Those event people are huge now. Event people do very well in digital because they understand inherently user-centric design. So think about tapping in some of those resources as well about how we can make this interactive and how we can get some of these problems solved. And remembering to emphasize that in today's world of digital, there does need to be some sort of entertainment factor. And I don't mean like silly, I mean like it's an interactive, participant, active level kind of experience on that web content. And remembering that the technology is there now to be able to do that. It's not the technology anymore. It's how do I apply my business problems and get the technology to facilitate pulling the right pieces together for each individual person. But we have to first come with a strategy and think in that way. So thanks very much for joining us, and we look forward to having you for future HighRoad Use sessions.